My name is Aldric Voss. Designation, Senior Archivist, Third Order. Attached to the Divisio Censoria of the Administrative on Scintilla. I am 79 years old. My hands shake when I write now. The ink bleeds where the tremor drags the nib, and each page I produce looks like the cartography of some dying river system. But I write. I must. For 53 years, I have catalogued the material conditions of Imperial citizens across 9 worlds, 4 segmenta, and what the Administratum politely refers to as all strata of the economic vertical. What that means, stripped of its bureaucratic anesthesia, is that I have lived among the poorest wretches the Imperium produces, and I have dined at the tables of those so wealthy they have forgotten what want even means. I have tasted every rung of this ladder we call civilization, from the Sump floor to the spire top. I have licked corpse-starch residue off tin plates in the underhive of Necromunda. I have drunk wine imported from orbital vineyards above Vanaheim, while a string quartet played music composed for an audience of 1. I did not belong in either place, perhaps. That is why they let me see clearly. What I am about to describe is not economics. It is not a treatise on fiscal policy or tithe assessment. It is what wealth feels like in the Imperium of man, in the body, in the lungs, in the teeth, because that is where you experience it first. Not in numbers on a cogitator ledger, in whether or not your bones ache when you wake, in whether the air you breathe tastes of rust or of roses, in whether the thing on your plate was once a person. I will begin at the bottom. Where else? The first time I descended into what the Necromundans call the Sump, I vomited within 40 seconds. This is not metaphor. This is not dramatic exaggeration for effect. My body rejected the air before my mind had time to process the smell. Magos Yentl, my escort from the Divisio biologist, had warned me to wear a rebreather, but I had wanted to experience the conditions as the inhabitants did, because I was a fool, because I was young, because I believed my scholarship demanded authenticity. The air in the Sump is not truly air. It is a gaseous suspension of chemical waste, organic rot, the vapor of radioactive effluent that has been filtering down through 200 levels of manufacturia for 6,000 years. It tastes of copper and ammonia and something else, something sweet in the worst possible way, the sweetness of advanced decomposition. That taste settled on my tongue like a film and did not leave for 3 days. The people of the Sump do not notice it. Their lungs have adapted, or perhaps more accurately, their lungs have surrendered. Every person I interviewed in those depths coughed, not occasionally, constantly. A wet, productive cough that punctuated every 3rd or 4th sentence, like a form of grammar. Marin, a woman of perhaps 30, though she looked 60, told me she had never been above level 400. She did not know what sunlight was. Not in the abstract sense. She understood that a star existed, but she had never conceived of its light as something that might touch skin. When I described it to her, she squinted as though I were describing a fairy tale. "Sounds like it'd burn," she said, and coughed into a rag that was already brown with old blood. The currency at Sump level is not throne gelt. It is not credits, or bonds, or anything with an Imperial seal. It is barter, ammunition, fungal bread, clean water measured in mouthfuls, scrap metal, the location of a body that has not yet been claimed by the Corks Guild. I watched a man trade a functional stub pistol, worth perhaps 40 throne gelt at mid-hive, for 2 liters of water that had been filtered through cloth and sand. The water was still yellow. He drank it in front of me, and the look on his face was something close to bliss. That was wealth at the Sump level. Water that was merely contaminated rather than immediately lethal. The hab units down there, if you can call them that, are nothing more than claimed spaces. A family might wall off a section of collapsed tunnel with scrap metal and industrial sheeting and call it home. I measured one such space. It was 3 meters by 2 meters. 6 people lived in it. A man named Drek, his partner Suli, and 4 children who ranged in age from roughly 2 to 11, though none of them knew their exact birthdays. There was no bed. They slept on layered rags. There was no door, just a curtain made from what I eventually identified as the cured hide of a sump rat. an animal roughly the size of a mid-hive house cat, with teeth that could shear through playsteel cable. Drek had killed it himself and considered the hide one of his most valuable possessions. Nutrition at Sump level comes from three sources: fungal growths that colonize the damp walls of the tunnels, the flesh of Sump vermin hunted in the dark, and corpse-starch when it can be obtained. The corpse-starch rarely reaches this deep. The Corpse Guild, the Mercator Pallidus, has a processing infrastructure that primarily serves levels 200 and above. Below that, the dead are not rendered into rations by any organized system. They are simply consumed. I say this without judgment. When the alternative is watching your children starve, the moral calculus becomes terrifyingly simple. A woman, whose name I was asked not to record, told me, with a steady voice and dry eyes, that her family had survived a 16-day famine by eating her mother, who had died of lung rot the week prior. She would have wanted it, the woman said. She wasn't selfish. I wrote it down. I did not weep until later, alone, in the relative safety of a mid-hive transit hostel. I wept not for the horror of it, but for the ordinariness. She had not been traumatized. She had been practical. That is what the Sump does to people. It strips away every layer of civilization until what remains is something pre-human, something that operates on the pure logic of biological survival. And the Imperium calls these people citizens. They are on the census rolls. They have designations. They are counted in the tithe assessments. The Administratum knows they exist, and it has decided through 10,000 years of bureaucratic indifference that their existence in these conditions is acceptable. Let me take you up, not far, merely 50 levels, from the Sump to what the Necromundans call the settled underhive, around levels 200 to 300. The transition is not gradual. There are checkpoints, some maintained by gangs, some by the enforcers of the Palatine cluster, most by whoever has enough bodies and enough guns to hold a choke point. Passing through them costs something. Always. A bribe, a toll, a favor owed. The economy of the underhive is an economy of obligation. Everyone owes someone. The trick is to owe the right people. The air at level 250 is marginally better. You can breathe it without a rebreather, though your throat will burn and your eyes will water for the first hour. There is lighting here, albeit intermittent. The ancient electrolumens that line the corridors flickering in patterns that suggest the power grid was last properly maintained sometime in the 37th millennium. The corridors are wide enough for two people to walk abreast. There are hab blocks, actual structures, with walls and floors and ceilings, though the walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbor's cough, your neighbor's arguments, your neighbor's prayers. A standard underhive hab unit at this level measures roughly 4 meters by 3 meters. One room. It will house a family of 4 to 8. The furniture, such as it is, consists of a sleeping platform made of welded scrap, a storage container, and if the family is fortunate, a small heating element powered by a jury-rigged connection to the main power conduit, which is technically theft, which is technically punishable by servitor conversion, which is technically never enforced at this depth, because the enforcers have better things to do. The people at this level eat corpse-starch regularly. It arrives in pressed blocks wrapped in waxed paper stamped with the seal of the Mercator Pallidus. It is grey. It has the consistency of chalk. It tastes, and I write this from personal experience, of salt and something faintly metallic and nothing else. There is no flavor. There is only the sensation of matter entering your mouth and a dull, grudging acknowledgement from your stomach that caloric intake has occurred. I ate it for 12 days during my initial survey. By the 4th day, I had stopped noticing the taste. By the 8th, I had stopped thinking of it as food and begun thinking of it as fuel. This is the psychological shift that defines underhive nutrition. You do not eat, you refuel. Meals are not events, they are maintenance. I met a ganger named Torsk, who ran a modest operation out of a converted water treatment plant on level 270. He had 17 people under his command. He controlled roughly 6 square kilometers of territory. By underhive standards, he was wealthy. His wealth manifested in the following ways. He ate twice a day instead of once. His corpse starch was supplemented with actual fungal paste, a greenish spread with a sour, mushroom-like flavor that is considered a delicacy at this depth. He had a personal sleeping space of approximately 6 square meters, which he shared with no one. He owned a working Lars pistol with a functional charge pack and a mono knife with an actual edge. He had boots, not foot wrappings, not scavenged plasteel strapped to his soles with wire. Actual boots, synth leather, reinforced toe, intact soles. He was, perhaps, the richest man on levels 260 through 280. "You know what real wealth is down here?" Torsk said to me, leaning back against a wall that sweated condensation. "It ain't credits. It ain't guns. It's knowing you'll eat tomorrow. That's it. That's the whole thing. If you know, really know, that there's food coming, you're rich. If you don't know, you're everyone else." I wrote his words down and have thought about them every day since. Now, let me bring you higher. Through the transitional zones, past the enforcer checkpoints that actually function, past the guild toll gates where a man must show a work chit or a residency stamp to pass, up through the great industrial belt that separates the underhive from the midhive. This is where the Imperium begins to acknowledge you. Below the industrial belt, you are statistically invisible. Above it, you become a data point. The midhive, levels 400 through 600 on a standard Necromunda pattern hive. This is where approximately 60% of a hive city's counted population lives. These are the factory workers, the Manufactorum operators, the shift laborers who spend 12 to 16 hours a day producing last cells, bolt casings, uniform cloth, ration tins, and the 10,000 other products that feed the Imperial war machine. They are the economic engine of the Imperium, and they live in conditions that would be considered criminal on any civilized world that had the luxury of moral standards. A mid-hive hab unit is larger than an underhive space, typically 6 meters by 4 meters for a family unit, sometimes with a partition creating a sleeping area separate from a living area. There is reliable power. There is running water, though the water is recycled and carries a chemical tang that never fully leaves your mouth. There is a communal ablution block on each hab level, shared among roughly 200 people. There is heat, regulated by the hive's central thermal systems, which maintain a constant temperature of approximately 21 degrees Celsius, though in practice the temperature fluctuates between 18 and 26, depending on proximity to the manufactoria. The food improves, marginally. Corpse-starch is still present, but it is supplemented by Soylent's viridians, a synthetic nutrient paste derived from vat-grown algae. It is green. It tastes of very little, but has a faintly vegetal quality that, after 12 days of pure corpse-starch, I found almost pleasant. The mid-hive worker receives a daily ration allocation based on their shift output. Produce more, eat more. This is the fundamental equation of mid-hive existence. Your body is a machine. The Imperium feeds it enough to keep it running. Not a calorie more, I lived at level 482 for 6 standard months in a hab unit, assigned to a worker named Kreven Holst and his wife Yenna. They had 3 children. Kreven worked a 14-hour shift in a lasgun assembly manufacturum. Yenna worked an 11-hour shift in a textile processing plant. Their combined daily income, paid in local scrip, redeemable at guild-operated dispensaries, was enough to feed the family, pay the hab rent, and leave a surplus of approximately 3 scrip per day. 3 scrip. That surplus was their wealth. Over a year, if nothing went wrong, if no one fell sick, if no equipment fines were levied, if no extraordinary tithe was declared, they could save enough to buy a small luxury, a flavor packet to add to the Soylent's viridians, a child's toy made of molded plast, a half-liter of second best, the locally brewed alcohol that tasted like promethium filtered through a sock. These small things were treasures. I watched Yenna add a flavor packet to the evening meal, something called meat style, and the children reacted as though she had produced a feast. Their eyes went wide. They actually smiled. "Don't tell their father," Yenna whispered to me, grinning. "He thinks I'm saving for new boots." That was wealth in the mid-hive. A packet of powdered flavoring that cost 2 days' surplus. The ability to make corpse-starch taste like something that was not corpse-starch. the capacity to surprise your children with the illusion of variety. There is something I must note here, because it becomes critical as we ascend. At every level of the hive, the people believe that their conditions are normal. Creven Holst did not consider himself poor. He had a hab unit, regular food, a work assignment, and a family. By his measure, he was doing well, better than his parents had, better than the underhivers certainly. He spoke of the levels below 300 the way a citizen of a civilized world might speak of a war zone, with distant sympathy and quiet gratitude that it was not him. This is the genius of the hive system. No one sees the full picture. Each level views the level below as the abyss, and the level above as the aspiration, and the gap between any two adjacent levels is small enough to seem natural. It is only when you travel the full vertical, as I have, that you understand the obscenity of the total distance. Now, higher. The upper mid-hive. Levels 600 through 750. Here live the overseers, the shift managers, the guild functionaries, the minor bureaucrats of the Administratum's local offices, the ecclesiarchy's parish priests, the medici practitioners who serve the working population. These are people with titles. Not grand titles, not lord or lady, but overseer, shift, primary, dispensary, manager, clerk, septimus. The titles matter because they confer privileges that are invisible from below and laughable from above, but which at this level constitute genuine comfort. An upper mid-hive hab unit is 8 meters by 6 meters. It has 2 rooms, sometimes 3. It has private ablution facilities, a small reclamation shower that provides 3 minutes of tepid water per day. It has a food preparation area with a heating element that actually functions reliably. The walls are painted, not well, and the paint is industrial grade and comes in exactly 4 colors: gray, lighter gray, off-white, and a shade of green that I suspect was intended to be calming, but instead suggests mild nausea. But the fact that the walls are painted at all is significant. It means someone, at some point in the hab's history, made an aesthetic choice. That is a luxury the underhive cannot conceive of. The food at this level includes actual variety. The ration allocation for an upper mid-hive functionary includes corpse-starch, Soylent's Viridians, and a rotating selection of supplementary items: protein cubes derived from vat-grown muscle tissue, carbohydrate wafers, occasionally a fruit analog produced in the hive's hydroponic sectors, a small, hard, vaguely citrus thing about the size of a man's thumb. It tastes of almost nothing, but it is real. It grew, it photosynthesized. This distinction between synthetic food and food that was once alive is the first great dividing line of imperial wealth. Below this line, you eat what was manufactured. Above it, you eat what was grown. I spoke with a woman named Administratum Clerk Septimus Letter Dre, who processed hab allocation forms on level 690. She had held the position for 22 years. Her hab unit had a window. Not a window to the outside, there is no outside at this depth, but a transparency in the wall that looked out onto one of the hive's great internal atriums. A shaft of open space, roughly 40 meters across and 700 meters tall, lined with glow lumens that simulated a faint, golden light. She could look out and see distance. She could see other hab blocks across the atrium, tiny figures moving in their own lit windows. She told me this view was the reason she had spent 11 years on a waiting list for this particular unit. Some mornings I just stand there, she told me, cradling a cup of recaf that steamed in the cool air. Just stand and look, and it feels like the hive goes on forever. Like there's space. I know it's not really space, but it feels like it. The recaf she drank was real, not synthetic, not simulated. Actual recaf, imported from an agri-world whose name she did not know, purchased at a guild dispensary for a price that would have fed a family of 4 in the underhive for a week. She drank it every morning. It was her single indulgence, and she spoke of it the way a rogue trader might speak of amasec aged in null-field casks, with reverence. That was wealth at the upper mid-hive. A window, a cup of real recaf. The sensation of looking out and seeing something other than a wall 2 meters from your face. Now we cross the barrier, the true barrier, the one that separates the hive's working population from its ruling class. There are physical checkpoints here, manned by private security in the employ of the noble houses, armored in carapace plate, carrying weapons that would be illegal for any citizen below this level to possess. To pass, you must have a writ of passage, a work assignment to the upper levels, or a bloodline that entitles you to be there. My Administratum credentials, stamped with the seal of the Divisio Censoria and countersigned by an inquisitorial contact whose name I am not permitted to record, got me through. The guards examined the documents for 9 minutes. They scanned me with an auspex. They checked my genetic markers against a database. Then they let me pass, and I stepped into the upper hive, and the world changed. The air was the first thing. It was clean, not filtered clean, not recycled clean, but actually clean, scrubbed and oxygenated, and faintly scented with something floral. I stood in the transition corridor and breathed and felt my lungs expand in a way they had not expanded in 6 months. I felt dizzy, not from toxins, but from the absence of toxins. My body, which had adapted to breathing contaminated air, did not know what to do with air that was simply good. The corridor itself was wide enough for 10 people to walk abreast. The floor was polished stone, actual quarried stone, not rockcrete or industrial decking. The walls were adorned with devotional frescoes depicting scenes from the Emperor's glory, rendered in pigments that had not faded despite what I estimated to be several centuries of age. There were plants, growing from alcoves set into the walls, green, living plants with actual leaves. I stopped and touched one. The leaf was waxy and cool and unmistakably real, and I stood there with my fingers on it for a long time, because in 6 months of lower hive habitation, I had not touched a living thing that was not human or vermin. The upper hive, levels 750 through 900. This is where the Imperium stops pretending that equality exists and begins openly celebrating hierarchy. The hab units here are apartments. They have multiple rooms, 5, 6, sometimes 10 or more for senior functionaries. They have furniture made of actual wood, imported from agri-worlds at staggering cost. They have art on the walls, not frescoes painted by anonymous laborers, but commissioned works by hive-sanctioned artisans. They have private ablution facilities with hot water, available on demand. They have food preparation areas, staffed by dedicated servants, human beings whose entire professional existence is devoted to preparing meals for a single family, and the food. Thrown above the food, I was invited to dine with Upper Hive Administrator Castius Wren on level 812, and the meal that was placed before me was so far removed from corpse-starch that they might as well have been products of different universes. There was grox-steak, actual grox-steak, imported from an agri-world in the Golgena Reach, seared in rendered fat, and served with a sauce made from fruits I could not identify. There was bread baked from grain, from actual grain, that had grown in soil under a sun. There was a salad of hydroponic greens dressed in oil pressed from seeds. There was a masek in crystal glasses that caught the light of the electro-chandelier and threw prismatic patterns across the table. I ate it. Emperor, forgive me. I ate it with the memory of Marin's bloody cough rag still fresh in my mind, with Torsk's words about knowing you'd eat tomorrow still ringing in my ears, and I enjoyed it. The grox-steak was tender and rich, and tasted of something complex and ancient, and deeply, fundamentally alive in a way that corpse-starch could never imitate. The bread was warm and soft, and yielded under my teeth with a quality that I can only describe as generosity. The amasek burned pleasantly and settled into my stomach like a small fire, and I understood, in that moment, with absolute clarity, why the people below were never allowed to see this. If a mid-hive worker, a man like Creven Holst, could see this table, could taste this food, could feel this air in his lungs, the result would not be aspiration, it would be revolution. Administrator Wren ate without particular attention. He spoke to me of tithe assessments while chewing his grox-steak with the casual indifference of a man for whom such meals were routine. He did not savor, he consumed. The food was simply the medium through which his body sustained itself, no different in his mind from the corpse-starch that sustained the billions below, except that it happened to taste better. He had no framework for understanding it as a privilege. He had no concept of what it meant to eat this way in a hive where millions subsisted on recycled human remains. He had been born at this level. He would die at this level. The levels below were an abstraction to him. Numbers on a productivity report. Statistics in a tithe assessment. They were not people. The hive functions, he told me, spearing a piece of grox-steak on a silver fork. Each level contributes. Each level receives according to its contribution. It is efficient. It is the Emperor's design. I did not argue with him. It was not my function to argue. It was my function to record, but there was further still to go. The spire. The true spire, levels 900 and above, where the hive narrows to its uppermost peaks, where the structures pierce through the acid cloud layer, where for the first time in the entire vertical span of the hive, there is natural light. Actual sunlight, filtered through armor glass panels, falling in golden shafts across halls of polished marble. I had not seen sunlight in 7 standard months. When it hit my face, I closed my eyes and stood still and felt the warmth on my skin, and something in my chest broke open that I did not know had been sealed shut. My eyes watered, not from pain, from something else. I did not have a word for it then. I think the word is grief. Grief for the billions below who would never feel this, who did not even know it was something that could be felt. The nobility of the spire live in a manner that bears no meaningful relationship to the word life, as understood by 99.9% of the hive's population. Their residences are not hab units. They are estates, sprawling complexes of dozens or hundreds of rooms, staffed by armies of servants, decorated with treasures accumulated over millennia of dynastic rule. I was granted audience with Lady Severina Harrowmast of House Harrowmast, a noble lineage that had held dominion over their spire sector for 1100 years. Her personal quarters alone occupied more floor space than a mid-hive hab block housing 300 workers. The floor was a mosaic of semi-precious stones depicting the Emperor's triumph at Ullanor, a scene from the Great Crusade rendered in lapis lazuli and carnelian and jade. The ceiling was painted with a fresco of the Astronomican's light, breaking through clouds, and it was so high above my head that I had to crane my neck to see it. The furniture was made of wood from trees that no longer existed, their species long extinct on their worlds of origin. Each piece therefore literally irreplaceable, worth more in raw material value than the annual economic output of some mid-hive sectors. There were paintings on the walls that had been created by artisans who had spent their entire lives on a single work, decades of labor condensed into a single frame, offered to the house as tribute. Lady Severina received me in a morning room with armor glass windows that looked out over the cloud layer. Below us, the acid haze roiled in brown and yellow currents, and above it, the sky was a deep, impossible blue. She wore a gown that had been woven from silk produced by gene-modified arachnids on a world I had never heard of, the fabric so fine that it seemed to float around her body like a second atmosphere. Her fingers were adorned with rings containing gemstones from 3 different star systems. Her hair was styled by a dedicated servant who held no other role in the household. She smelled of perfume distilled from the pollen of flowers grown in an orbital botanical garden, and the scent was so complex and so utterly alien after months of underhive air that I felt briefly intoxicated. She served me tea, not recaf. Tea, an infusion of dried leaves from a plant cultivated on a pleasure world in the Golgena Reach, served in a cup so thin I could see the shadow of my fingers through the porcelain. It tasted of nothing I had ever encountered. Light, floral, faintly sweet. A single cup of this tea cost, by my calculation, more than Creven Holst earned in 6 months of 14-hour shifts. "Do you know," Lady Severina said, stirring her cup with a golden spoon, "my grandmother once told me that the lower levels are quite fascinating. She visited them once, apparently, went down to level 600 or so, said the people were resilient. Such a wonderful word, don't you think?" She smiled. It was a warm smile, a genuinely charming smile, the smile of a woman who had been educated from birth in the social graces and who wielded kindness as effortlessly as a lesser person might wield a blade. There was no malice in it. That was the worst part. She was not cruel. She was simply removed, separated from the suffering below by so many layers of stone and steel and privilege that it had become conceptually unreachable. She could no more understand the life of a Sump dweller than a Sump dweller could understand hers. They inhabited the same structure. They breathed the same recycled atoms. They were as distant from each other as two stars in separate galaxies. "Tell me," she said, leaning forward with what appeared to be genuine interest. "Is it truly as bad as they say?" "It is worse," I said. "How dreadful," she replied, and sipped her tea. "But even the spire nobility, even the Lady Severinas of the Imperium, are poor by the standards of those who operate above the planetary scale. I learned this when my research took me off-world, when the Divisio Sensoria secured me passage on an Administratum transport to observe wealth at its highest imperial expressions. I will tell you about the rogue trader. His name was Lord Captain Erasmus var Dorian of the Dorian dynasty, bearer of a warrant of trade signed in the 31st millennium, a document so old and so sacred that it was kept in a stasis-sealed reliquary aboard his flagship, the Sovereign Aspiration, a lunar-class cruiser 4 kilometers from prow to stern. I was granted 3 days aboard his vessel. 3 days. I could have spent 3 decades and not catalogued a fraction of the wealth contained within its hull. The Lord Captain's personal quarters occupied an entire deck of the ship, not a section of a deck. An entire deck, approximately 200 meters long and 150 meters wide, a space larger than many imperial cathedrals. The ceiling was vaulted and supported by columns of marble veined with gold, actual gold, not gilt, not gold leaf, but solid threads of auric metal running through stone, quarried from a world that had since been consumed by a warp storm and thus no longer existed. The floor was carpeted in the fur of void beasts hunted in the Coronis expanse, each pelt representing an animal that had taken a team of 12 hunters 6 months to track and kill. There were hundreds of these pelts, laid over one another in overlapping layers of silver and white and deep midnight blue. The furniture included a dining table carved from a single piece of wraithbone, Xenos material of Eldari origin, worth more than most planetary governors' annual discretionary budgets. The Lord Captain had won it in a trade negotiation with an Eldari Corsair prince, or so he told me, and the fact that he could display it openly, without fear of inquisitorial censure, spoke to the extraordinary latitude granted by his warrant of trade. The table was set with plates of beaten platinum and crystal glasses that sang a faint harmonic note when the ship's engines changed pitch. The food served at Lord Captain Dorian's table made Lady Severina's grox-steak look like corpse-starch. The meal I was served on my first evening aboard included the following: a starter of void-oysters harvested from the shell reefs of Zaith, each one the size of my fist, briny and rich and faintly luminescent, still glowing with bioluminescence as they were placed before me. Soup, made from the marrow of grox prime, a genetically superior breed of grox, raised on a private agri-world owned entirely by the Dorian dynasty, flavored with spices that had been sourced from 7 different worlds. A main course of amble steak, the flesh of a creature so dangerous that hunting one was considered a feat worthy of song, seared at a precise temperature by a chef who had been recruited from a pleasure world and paid more annually than a mid-hive shift manager would earn in a lifetime. A dessert of crystallized fruit preserved in a liqueur distilled from flowers that bloomed once every 30 years. The Lord Captain ate this meal the way Administrator Wren had eaten his grox-steak, without particular attention. But where Wren's indifference had been the ignorance of a man who had never known less, Dorian's was the satiation of a man who had tasted everything. He had eaten the cuisine of 100 worlds. He had drunk wines aged in the holds of starships for centuries. He had consumed delicacies that existed in quantities so small that the act of eating them was, effectively, the act of rendering an entire species or vintage extinct. He was not indifferent because he didn't understand luxury. He was indifferent because luxury had exhausted itself. There was nothing left that could surprise his palate, nothing left that could make him feel what Yella's children had felt when they tasted a meat-style flavor packet in their corpse-starch. The real wealth, Lord Captain Dorian told me, swirling something amber in a glass that was worth more than my annual salary. Isn't this? He gestured at the table, the pelts, the wraithbone, the platinum. This is just stuff. The real wealth is the warrant. Warrant means I go where I please. I trade with whom I choose. I am beyond the law of any world, any governor, any institution, save the High Lords themselves. I am free. In an Imperium of 1,000,000 worlds, do you know how many people are truly free? I could count them and still have fingers left. He was not boasting. He was stating a fact with the calm certainty of a man who had never had cause to doubt it. I spent my last evening aboard the Sovereign Aspiration, standing at a viewport on the observation deck. The void spread before me, the stars scattered across the blackness, like the Emperor's own jewels cast upon a cloth of night. Below, the planet turned slowly, its hive cities visible as clusters of light upon the dark surface, each cluster containing billions of souls, stacked in their vertical hierarchies of misery and privilege. I thought about Marin in the Sump, coughing blood into a rag. I thought about Torsk with his precious boots. I thought about Creven and Yenna and their children's faces when the flavor packet hit the Soylent's Viridians. I thought about Letta Dre at her window, looking out at the illusion of space. I thought about Administrator Wren, chewing grox-steak without tasting it. I thought about Lady Severina, calling suffering dreadful, and meaning it, truly meaning it, in the most useless possible way. And I thought about what lay above even the rogue traders, the High Lords of Terra, the Senatorum Imperialis, bees, who sat at the apex of 1,000,000-world civilization and commanded resources that defied quantification. I have never been granted access to that level. No archivist of my designation ever will be, but I have read the sealed reports, the classified assessments, the documents that are marked with the crimson seal of the Ordo Hereticus, and filed in vaults that require 3 separate biometric keys to open. I know that the master of the Administrative controls the economic output of 1,000,000 worlds. I know that the Ecclesiarch commands the spiritual loyalty of trillions. I know that the Fabricator General of Mars sits upon a throne of archaeotech so ancient and so powerful that it makes the Dorian dynasty's Wraithbone table look like a child's toy. At that level, wealth ceases to be a concept that has any relationship to material goods. A High Lord does not own things the way a spire noble owns a painting, or a rogue trader owns a void ship. A High Lord controls systems. They control the mechanisms by which food reaches 1,000,000,000 mouths, by which soldiers are deployed to 1,000 war zones, by which the Astronomicon is maintained and the Golden Throne is fueled. Their wealth is the wealth of function. They are wealthy because the Imperium requires them to be, because the alternative, the collapse of the systems they administer, would mean the death of everything. I cannot tell you what that feels like. I can only tell you what I have been told by those who have glimpsed it, and what they say, consistently, universally, is that it does not feel like wealth at all. It feels like weight, an unbearable, crushing, never-ending weight. The weight of a species' survival pressing down on a handful of shoulders, day after day, century after century, with no prospect of relief and no hope of gratitude. The High Lords do not eat for pleasure. They eat to maintain biological function. They do not sleep for rest. They sleep because their bodies, however augmented, still require it. They do not live in luxury because they desire comfort. They live in luxury because the Imperium requires its highest servants to project an image of absolute, unassailable authority, and that image demands golden halls and jeweled thrones and robes of impossible fineness, or so I am told, perhaps. They simply enjoy it, perhaps. The weight is a story they tell themselves. Perhaps, at the very top, the view is the same as at the very bottom. You tell yourself whatever you must in order to sleep at night. I am home now, at my desk, in my archive on Scintilla, surrounded by the data slates and parchment scrolls that contain the testimony of 53 years of research. My candle gutters, the electrolumens in my chamber, have been flickering for a week, and the maintenance servitor assigned to this sector of the Administratum complex has not responded to my 3 formal requests for repair. My own quarters are modest, 6 meters by 5, a sleeping cot, a writing desk, A small bookshelf containing the 14 volumes of my published work, none of which sold more than 200 copies. I eat regimental standard rations provided by the Administratum commissary. They include Soylent's Viridians and a protein supplement that tastes of salt. I am, by any reasonable measure, a mid-hive equivalent in terms of material comfort, neither rich nor poor, merely present, a data point in the census, a man who eats and sleeps and works and will, someday soon given the tremor in my hands and the ache in my chest, die and be recycled into the bureaucratic machinery of the Imperium's record-keeping. My name filed, my work archived. My body returned to the great cycle of material reclamation. But I have seen. That is my wealth, my terrible, unbearable, precious wealth. I have seen the full vertical. I have tasted the corpse-starch and the void-oysters and the cheap recaf and the impossible tea. I have breathed the Sump air and the spire air and the recycled air of a rogue trader's warship. I have looked into the eyes of people at every level of this hierarchy and seen the same thing staring back at me from every single one of them. A human being trying to survive, telling themselves whatever story they need to tell in order to make it through another day. That is the truth the Imperium does not want recorded. Not that the rich are decadent and the poor are wretched. Everyone knows that. The truth it fears is simpler. The distance between the woman eating her dead mother in the Sump and the Lord Captain eating void oysters in his golden hall is not a distance of merit. It is not a distance of divine favor or imperial design or the emperor's will. It is a distance of birth, nothing more. An accident of location, a lottery of levels. The child born at level 900 will eat grox-steak. The child born at level 50 will eat the dead. Neither chose, neither earned it, neither deserved it. The hive simply decided 10,000 years ago that this was how it would be, and 10,000 years of inertia have made the decision feel like truth. I write this because someone must. I write this knowing it will be sealed, classified, buried in a vault that requires 3 biometric keys and an inquisitorial mandate to access. I write this knowing that the people who need to read it never will, and the people who will read it do not need to. That is the final expression of imperial wealth, the ultimate luxury, the ability to know the truth and do nothing about it. My candle is nearly out. The shadows are long across my desk. I can hear the hive humming around me, the deep bass vibration of a billion lives stacked on top of one another, each one burning in its own small way, each one believing it knows what the world is. They don't. None of them do. And I, who have seen it all, who have tasted every level of this monstrous, magnificent, terrible machine, I know least of all, because knowing changes nothing. That is the cruelest lesson the vertical teaches. It is not that wealth is unevenly distributed, it is that the distribution is invisible to those within it and unbearable to those who see it whole. I set down my pen. I close the ledger. I blow out the candle. And somewhere, 700 levels below me, a woman coughs blood into a rag. And somewhere, 300 levels above me, a lady sips her tea. And neither one knows the other exists. And the hive goes on, and the hive goes on, and the hive goes on.